It's called Why Bitcoin Mining is an Opportunity for the EU Energy Grid and Environment. And on the panel, we've got Čapek, Philip Walton, Lyudmyla Kozlovska, Dorien Rookmaker, and Lisa Hough. Take it away.
Thank you. Thank you guys for coming. My name is Lyudmyla Kozlovska. I represent Open Dialogue Foundation. We are a human rights group, and you would think why, as a human rights defender, I can speak about Bitcoin mining, why I should care. First of all, for me, it's freedom technology. We use it not only as a payment instrument, but also as a remedy against dictatorships who going after us, abusing anti-money laundering regulation. We were just discussing it in a main stage. So activists, while we're presenting and defending Bitcoin as a freedom technology in front of regulators on EU, US, generally globally, we were always asked, why are you guys using this instrument, which is bad for environment and bad for energy security? So we tried to collect the best knowledge from Bitcoiners, Bitcoin miners, energy security experts to actually debunk this propaganda, because it has nothing to do with reality. It can actually help democracies, and specifically EU. It's an opportunity for EU grid environment, but we need to discuss it. We need to regulators to educate about this. And we issued at least 2 submissions on this regard. And we want to organize this different kind of discussion. We call them freedom technology dialogues. We want to establish Freedom Technology Embassy in Brussels to defend Freedom Technology Embassy and technology as Bitcoin mining. And all of this panel is going to be one of example messages we want to share with people who decide how our future going to look like. So I have an honor to ask questions and share the best experience of our experts in Bitcoin community, but also legislative. Dorien, if you don't mind, I would like to start with you. First of all, introduce more to audience and say us what do you know about Bitcoin, how many Bitcoiners you met during your membership in European Parliament, and do you think it's important how you actually going to get these resources of information, how it was affecting your policy proposals or your votes, so Bitcoiners also know how they should participate in this process.
Well, okay, a lot of questions. My name is Dorien Rookmaker. I was a member of parliament for the last couple of 4 years. I was a member of the Econ Committee, and in my role as a member of the Econ Committee, I was involved in legislation about Bitcoin, for example, MiCA. And before that, I was a senator, and before that, I was a banker. So this is in short. I started my own platform for politicians on a local level, national level, and European level. For people who want to be a representative on any kind of level, but don't like the party discipline that parties have. I think a politician, especially a representative, needs to be able to speak, think, and vote according to his conscience and the best of his abilities, and not because somebody tells him how to vote. So this is about me. How many people did I meet? None, 0. So I was, of course, like every other member of the European Parliament, you get you'll be lobbied. And this has a bad connotation because people think about lobbying like a shady business and people who are meeting you in a dark corner of the European Parliament telling you something or giving you money. But lobbying is for a lot of people educating people of the European Parliament who are legislators. And this is very necessary because people who are working in the European Parliament, who are a member of the European Parliament, normally know nothing about things like Bitcoin. So you have to educate them, because if you don't, they will make rules and regulations that don't add up, that don't make sense, and worst case, that ruin your business. For instance, politicians are, a lot of them are civil servants, former civil servants, and they are risk averse, and they're always pushing the brakes. So they think about Bitcoin or crypto assets, then they think about all the bad things that can happen when you introduce it. That you cannot get tax anymore, that will be environmentally unfriendly, that terrorism will be financed, whatever. But they're not thinking about opportunities. So, for instance, we see that a country like Norway is already saying, we don't want anything to do with crypto assets because it's not helping society. And they say this based on, I don't know. But you maybe think Norway is no part of the EU, who cares? But people, especially in government, tend to look at each other and tend to copy each other. So it's very important that you do act upon a remark like this.
And for this reason, Dorien, we brought you the best experts, actually. And I would like them to introduce, so you have like small meeting what we normally should carry in European Parliament. I hope one day we will do it, but let's try to do here. So let's start to introducing.
So my name is Philip. I'm one of the co-founders of Gridless. We're doing Bitcoin mining and energy development in Africa. I think it's been really encouraging walking around and talking to people, and I think it's and I say this humbly that what we've been doing is inspirational, in terms of demonstrating the value proposition for people that are disadvantaged. So there are 600 million Africans that don't have access to electricity, and the national grid is never going to reach them. And so by using Bitcoin mining as an economic catalyst for new energy development, we can bring renewable energy to more people that otherwise won't have it. And as we all know, energy is the foundation for economic growth. So it is actually life critical that we develop more energy access. And so that's what we're doing at Gridless.
Amazing. Jan?
I'm Jan. I'm one of the co-founders of Brains, and we're basically the company providing the shovels in terms of full software stack for the miners. So it starts with the mining pool, goes over a firmware that's running in the mining machines, and there are some management platforms built on top of that that makes running a full mining operation, let's say, easier with some monitoring and so on. So the other day we had a discussion with Philip exactly about the grid balancing things, where the software actually gets exactly in the place where it allows like ramping down the machines and balancing the grid and so on. So we are the shovel providers, but I guess we have a say to this whole topic, because essentially our core business is providing the software. If the Bitcoin mining doesn't exist, we'll probably have to do a different type of software. So let's have the discussion about all this.
Amazing. Lisa?
Yeah, hi, I'm Lisa Hough. I represent Bitcoin Today Coalition. We do a lot of work in Washington with policymakers. I'm also on the board of Proof of Workforce. We provide education for pensions, but also those that belong to unions. So I guess you could say I'm an educator. I'm really just a Bitcoin zealot. I found Bitcoin, I don't know, it feels like yesterday. And my previous career was in the energy business. I'm a Texan, traded natural gas, really understand the connection between abundant energy and human flourishing, and so I'm an energy maxi. I was just going to respond to a couple of things that were said, though. You mentioned that these politicians have no idea, and et cetera, and I think you made kind of a remark that you weren't quite sure why they don't know, or that they have a negative feeling, and it's because the mainstream media perpetrates these narratives, right? Like, we have maybe perhaps all believed originally what we heard about Bitcoin or crypto or how terrible it is for the environment, and it's just really time for us to reject these narratives that we hear in our schools and on the news and in corporate offices who perpetrate scams in order to greenwash or virtue signal, et cetera. I mean, I think this is the best thing about Bitcoin, is that it makes you consider every single thing that you're presented with in a new light. Is this true? And so I really hope that through your leadership, thank you, and highlighting these issues that people will give it another chance and really sort of let the beauty of what we're trying to accomplish wash over them. And Philip, what you do is nothing short of inspirational. Watch their videos.
But I think, because Lisa and I were having this conversation the other night, I mean, I think it's, the media's done an incredible disservice in painting the energy consumption of Bitcoin as a negative, when in fact it's a feature. In fact, it's the best feature of Bitcoin. And I'm now going to call myself an energy maximalist, because that is in fact what I am. But I think what people fail to understand is that not all energy is productive at all times. And in fact, a tremendous amount of energy is, you used distressed? Was that the word you were? Stranded. It's unproductive. It's unvaluable. You know, in Africa, it's very easy to highlight because an energy site in the middle of the bush, there's nobody else to buy that electricity. So it can produce more, but there's nobody to buy it. That's a massive economic disadvantage for the energy generator. But the same is true in every grid, in every country in the entire planet. And the more we add things like wind and solar, the more disadvantaged or unproductive energy we're going to produce. And the great thing about Bitcoin mining is it only likes disadvantaged energy. It does not like productive energy. In fact, economically, Bitcoin miners are only incented to take energy that's not valuable to somebody else, which is why I'm wearing a dung beetle shirt, because it's very similar to the dung beetle. It takes something that nobody else wants and turns it into something productive and valuable for the ecosystem.
Can I ask a question? Yeah. I would like to ask a question because I think in the EU, people understand the concept of waste when it comes to alternative energy sources like solar and wind. They all know this. And a lot of member states are struggling with their power grid because it's not up to the task. So, but what we do not understand is if you put this energy into Bitcoin, what happens next?
Quick reaction.
You see how it's interesting, right? You need to go to the parliament to actually discuss it.
People actually don't realize that there's not too many ways how you can store energy. Okay, we have power plants where you can actually pump the water up and then sort of a battery. There's no other way of storing the energy, and if you take the actual chemical batteries, that's not in a very efficient way. It doesn't scale very well in terms of like huge energy spikes from wind, solar, and so on. But Bitcoin is the battery. It's the economical battery because I can burn the energy, transform it into Bitcoin, and at the time when I need the money, I can actually buy the energy. We should be thinking about the energy as a commodity. And I think when I read all the papers from IMF that Lyudmyla nicely put together, it's very scary because they think of somebody like, you know, making up the prices of the energy. No, this is a commodity market. It should be a free market. And if I, as a miner, have an opportunity to buy the energy, the stranded energy, whatever, then I should have the right to use it. And that's sort of, you know, disappearing from the whole concept.
Philip, sorry, can I just make the analogy to what you were saying? I came up with this the other night. Maybe this won't make any sense, but if you consider a wind farm and a garden hose, and the garden hose is funneling the wind into the wind farm, right? But if there's excess and there's, let's just use the water analogy, if it takes water to go through the water hose, Bitcoin mining is this water tank, right? And so the more of these systems that you can build, the more energy that there will be on the grid, which is why it's beneficial to have Bitcoin mining, just as though you've demonstrated.
Yeah, and I think, you know, going back to this notion of grid stability, if we want to run a bunch of coal-fired power plants as our base load, and then we want to run some diesel or nat gas peaker plants to adjust, because the sad reality is that we can't just take the average energy consumption and produce at that level, because we have periods of peak demand and then we have periods of almost no demand. And so when you introduce renewables, intermittent renewables into that equation, it makes the grid inherently less stable, right? So if we go back to fossil fuels, we can get a pretty stable grid. If we introduce renewables, we now make the grid much more unstable. And I think the interesting about Bitcoin mining, just as Jan was saying, is it is, and I don't like repeating Michael say that, but it's economic, it's economic storage. Like, you're storing energy in an economic form that you then can use, but the net result is you can now make a more stable grid. So
I understand.
yeah, and
You explain it so well.
Well, I think one of the things that
So you
people
can
don't,
do it, guys, you see.
well, so one of the concepts we've been talking to a lot of the African governments, because they have the exact same problem. So Kenya, I can literally give you example after example how renewable projects have increased the cost of energy in Kenya. And Kenya has over 80% renewable production. And the reason is because a solar developer comes in and gets the government to give them what's called a take or pay contract, meaning the government must buy the electricity that's produced. So if the sun is shining, we turn off our hydro dam that's already paid for, we turn off our geothermal that's already paid for, and we pay for this expensive renewable, intermittent renewable solar. And so, one of the things we've been talking about is the amazing thing about Bitcoin miners, and it is actually the reason that Jan is so important to this conversation, is with the right software controls, instead of having to turn on a nat gas or a diesel peaker plant to balance out peak demand, we can actually run our base loads at a higher level all the time, which is good for them. And then when that peak demand exists, you essentially create an inverse peaker. Like you cut the miners instantly, and that power flows into the grid. So you can create a much more stable grid and introduce more intermittent renewables and maintain that stable grid. But as to date, and I do hope somebody else invents an economically viable technology that will do something similar, but nothing else exists like Bitcoin mining to be able to solve that problem.
Do you know what kind of risk you're running right now? Because, I'm not sure. I'm just asking. Did you read the IMF paper about Bitcoin and the taxation they want, or even if you see what the ECB is talking about, it wants to prohibit the technology.
Yes, in the same, maybe just one more also for audience, European Security Market Authorities just recently published a final report about technical standards of how they evaluate so-called energy consumption thresholds. And what does it mean? We need to explain a little bit. Maybe you guys, as a professional from Bitcoin community, can actually explain it. What does it mean for you as an industry? And this is what risk you are asking, Dorien, right?
I mean, I'm like reading the papers terrifies me. I think if the European Union moves in this direction and decides to put these punitive taxation or regulatory measures, it will have a terribly detrimental effect to Bitcoin mining. And this is why I think we need to shift the conversation. So, if you take the International Energy Agency estimates that $120 billion per year needs to be invested in Africa to just meet the bare minimum energy targets. Of that, 30% must be subsidized, and most of that subsidy is coming from the European Union. So that's money that today must come out of somebody's coffers, and if you remove Bitcoin from the equation, that subsidy is necessary. If you leave Bitcoin in the equation, that subsidy is no longer necessary. You now have a free market economic driver that can remove that subsidy and still achieve the energy targets, in a continent like Africa. And I think that's what's important. And Lisa said it correctly. Like there's a media narrative that Bitcoin mining is bad, it consumes energy, it wastes energy. And the truth is, it's doing something with energy that actually not only improves the economic viability of new energy development, it reduces the amount of money that the European Union needs to invest in achieving these energy objectives for a place like Africa. It's also creating a significant amount of new renewable energy on the planet. And in my mind, all three of those are valuable to the European Union. But that's not the narrative they're hearing.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the EU would be well served to look at ERCOT in Texas, our grid, right? I think it's probably the largest grid on Earth. And ERCOT has come out in favor of Bitcoin mining. They absolutely see the benefit. And to your point on the free market, the whole reason Warren Buffett doesn't like Bitcoin is because he was trying to build 10 peaker plants in Texas and get a guaranteed rate of return of like 9%. And in Texas, we believe in the free market. And we said no. And he was going to build 500 megawatts, get his guaranteed rate of return on his $80 billion or whatever. That would be a direct burden to me, the taxpayer, of like $1 a month. The nail salon was like $8 a month. The Coca-Cola bottler was like $100 a month. We can eliminate these burdens on taxpayers. And so that same 500 megawatts was built by a huge public Bitcoin mining company in Corsicana, Texas. 500 megawatts, the same 500, right? They went into the market, they coordinated their capital, they organized the contractors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Free market. And when the grid needs the power, they shut off, thanks to this technology.
Thank you. Jan, can you explain what exactly actually ESMA propose and how it's going to affect industry? So I think we need to be more specific.
Yeah, a few more notes before we get into this. It's actually one of our customers using our technology for the curtailment. I also read the IMF papers, and what I find a bit scary is that they basically try to say, the main reasoning for the audience, it's basically saying, okay, if we're going to introduce, they call it cryptocarbon tax,
85%.
And it's actually, I think, eventually the paper that I read is in absolute value like 5-8 cents, whatever. But the whole story behind it is that they're explaining or reasoning out that this is necessary because they are going to incentivize the miners and the businesses to operate with a more efficient equipment. But this problem doesn't actually exist. The industry is fully incentivized to run at the cutting edge technology a few years ago, the machine was consuming like 50 or 60 joules per terahash. Terahash is the unit for hashing. And now we're at 15. So it's like fourfold improvement on the machines. So the market solved the problem, and every miner joining this computer game, I call it a computer game, has to be able to make this economical calculation if their operation is going to be profitable or if it's going to go bankrupt. And it has to project a little bit what's going to be the evolution in the network difficulty and so on. Second thing that I find scary in all these papers, they're only talking about using the energy, but they don't even mention what's the purpose. What's the purpose of proof of work? If there is any, it completely ignores. It just says, okay, proof of work is using energy, so it's bad. But it's a feature, as Philip said. And the feature is very important because it's the security. And now actually we as a humanity are in a situation where we have a very unique technology in hand. I think it's the first time after the gold where you actually have assets that are permissionless and trustless that I can transfer all over the globe. I cannot take my gold across the globe. It's very difficult. And this is unique. And none of these papers even try to mention any of that. They just say, okay, let's do proof of stake. It's actually much.
Golden standard, as called European Commission.
Pretty much. And back to your question about the paper from the European Union, they basically say we want to impose a limit of 500 megawatt hours onto an operation, which if you actually make the calculation, it's ridiculous. 500 megawatt hours is nothing. It boils down to an operation consuming 57 kilowatts of power. Because people generally confuse power and energy. Power is a rate of energy. That's the kilowatt hours. Physicists call it joules, typically, with some little conversion there. So it's 57 kilowatts. And to get the idea, if you have a bigger family house, or let's say an apartment house with let's say 2 apartments, 57 kilowatts is probably going to be your heat source.
I'll give you a scarier stat. So I'll give you a scarier stat. With the most efficient miner today, it takes roughly 500 megawatt hours to make one Bitcoin. So at the current hash price.
So in case we can say that it's regulatory approach to ban Bitcoin mining effectively.
Well, it is effectively going to ban Bitcoin mining, but it would say that each company can only put in enough energy to equate to producing one Bitcoin, and now you're done.
Wow.
Well, yeah, you can see that a lot of politicians and legislators do not trust the market. And so this is why they want to have incentives to get energy usage down. And of course, it doesn't make sense if you are in an organization. Doesn't matter if you do business, you want to drive costs down, and energy is cost. So it makes sense to drive your energy usage down. This is normal, but they don't act like it.
But in the end effect is they're actually driving the energy prices up. Again, the audience is European-based, and especially in Czech Republic, there was a big affair a few years ago where essentially the government, and I think it's coming also from European levels, incentivizing a strange business of basically guaranteeing that if you build a solar plant, so something that creates peaks in the grid, you're guaranteed a ridiculously high price with the reasoning, oh, this is the green stuff. But eventually, all of the consumers who buy the regular energy, so for me, regular energy is probably nuclear, a bit of fossil, whatever, are subsidizing this activity. So the free market, narrative was completely gone, and that's also coming up again in these papers. In the IMF paper, what it tries to show is that they want to socialize carbon dioxide tax, basically, onto all the users of the electricity, but they took a small sector of Bitcoin mining. So one thing is like, why would you want to socialize something like this? Like, why? This should be a free market. The producer of the dirty energy are the coal power plants. So why don't they impose the tax on the producers? Well, I can explain it, I think, because it's government owned. So the government would have to be paying taxes to itself, which doesn't work, right? They can print the money and, it's sort of like the Burr machine. But it's ridiculous. But instead of this proposal, basically to disincentivize or incentivize shutting down the inefficient and polluting power plants and building something more clean, which currently we still don't have fusion. Nuclear fusion is probably the nuclear power is the only pure energy that we can currently access. Okay, there are some lucky states that have hydro. There's nothing else than that. But they approach it from the other side, saying, okay, we're gonna imply the tax on the consumers, on the ones who actually buy it on the free market, and then we're gonna differentiate who you are as a consumer. Are you a household or are you actually a mining operation? Which is a bit unfair.
So Dorien, we have 6 minutes. Can you explain shortly, so we can also give an answer for our panel, what audience and our panelists can do? Did you understand first the explanation? Was it enough for you to understand? This is first question. And actually what we can do, knowing all your background as a politician, how to improve situation?
Yes, I think I understood because you explained it so well. But I think one thing is you should go to the European Parliament. Somebody in the European Parliament, there's always something going on. It's not only voting and plenary sessions. There are also events, and so we have to find an MEP who wants to organize this event because we have to change the narrative. Because when I was asked for this panel, and I looked at the question that was asked, I couldn't believe my eyes, because I believed this narrative also. I thought Bitcoin and is only about wasting energy and because I read the IMF report and I read the report of the ECB, and it worried me. But it worried me because I thought the ECB is taking on another mandate, not only about inflation, not only about financial stability, but also about using of energy, and this is worrying in itself. But now that I understand, I think it's very important that I'm not the only one to make a long story short. And in the last mandate, it was only the Econ Committee and the Jury Committee who were busy with Bitcoin and ledger technology, but ENVI will step in as well. ENVI is the Green Committee. It's about energy and environment. So I would recommend also people here in the audience, write to your ENVI committee member of your own member states and tell them about this story, about this explanation. And let's organize an event in the European Parliament, in the heart of the democracy of Europe, because everybody should understand. And especially Jan, your numbers, you know, it's very important to have them on a one-pager. Yes.
So I just want to really echo what she said. I mean, so I'm now, as somebody that's not European, speaking to the European Bitcoiners in the room, which is, if you read the papers that we read, it is an existential threat to Bitcoin.
We're happy to share it. We will publish it.
You know, it is terrifying if the European Union wants to legislate that Bitcoin has to move to proof of stake or be banned. We all know that removes the value proposition from Bitcoin. So as Europeans, I'm personally appealing to you, embrace the fact that the energy uses of Bitcoin is a feature. Be articulate in being able to explain why that's valuable. And then engage with your parliamentarians to be able to express the importance of seeing this preserved. Otherwise, Bitcoin is at risk if these laws pass.
To address this problem, a regular attack on freedom technology, Bitcoin mining, we want to create freedom technology embassy in Brussels, where we would have this kind of discussion, this and previous discussion. We would do serial of this. We would do meetings for developers, and we have to have a hub, a place where exchange of views between regulators and developers and users will meet, and we will find our solution how we should live in this second world economy, biggest economy, because the first one is US, the second one is actually with 450 million of customers is EU. We should live in a normal world. I would like to ask you, because you are not EU member, but you actually can have vision about competitiveness and effectiveness of this regulation. What would you suggest as a last year recommendation and call for EU regulators and also EU citizens, what they should do to actually, you know, be effective, competitive as a market, second market in the world, the biggest one?
Yeah, well, thank you. I would like to just, you made a comment on the earlier panel that we need to look at this at a strategic level, not an operational level. And so I'm a parent, and I always think about kind of parenting, and I equate a lot of things to that. And I would appeal to you and say that if these regulators are trying to stop innovation in the state, place that you live, it is directly a vote of no confidence in you. It is directly a vote of no confidence in your ability to innovate or make responsible choices. You should be on fire. I'm on fire. I don't live here. Again, I wrote down a lot of what you said earlier. It really touched me. You cannot have sustainable innovation or sustainable growth without freedom. Stand up for it.
Jan, something to add?
I think one more organization that should be mentioned is the UN, United Nations. They actually published a paper that's like full of lies about environmental impact of proof of work, reaching from water footprint over the land footprint. You can always find the counter arguments. Majority of Bitcoin mining is air-cooled. About the landscape, okay, let's look at the nice windmills in Germany making noise, breaking the whole, you know, it's nothing spectacular, not even mentioning the footprint of the solar and so on. And then in the last point is always like projection of the coal mining and basically the coal power plants are being used exclusively in Bitcoin mining. But I remember a nice analogy. We have been building a nuclear power plant in the Czech Republic, and in Austria, they were so much against it, so they were selling these like special filters into your socket that would allow you to use only the electricity, the current that's not coming from nuclear, and people were actually buying it. I'm serious. This really existed. So they were so you know, upset with the fact that a neighboring country is building the nuclear power plant next to them. Sure, it has some dangers and so on. We all live basically close to Chernobyl, right? But an analogy is that with the coal power plants, like, they should start from the power plants themselves. They should not be projecting that everybody who uses the electricity is generating the carbon dioxide. Because then, how about charging the electromobiles? That's a big carbon dioxide footprint as well to charge them, right? It's a bit of energy, plus the inefficiency of charging and discharging it. So, I mean, nothing is white and black. There's always something in between, and these reports try to be very, very opinionated. And when somebody who walks from the street reads it, they get the idea, oh, so this is all bad, let's do it that way. It has to be bad, right? Because UN writes it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. We're out of our time. I'm happy, guys, you was with us. If you want to learn more, if you want to get these documents, please reach out, support us. We want to build this home for freedom technology in Brussels, where all of you can meet and discuss and actually create our future. Thank you.